guys, welcome back to Critical Flick. This week we are diving into another movie, a part of the Marvel Universe, Spider-Man: Homecoming.
So, as you know, Spider-Man's one of the few Marvel superheroes that has never been part of the MCU prior to having that little cameo in Civil War. And this was his first big outing, his first big entry into this big, huge universe that everybody loves.
Yes, it is. It's his first outing, and coming off the Andrew Garfield movies, they had to do something with the Spider-Man series.
The plot of this movie is, it's a little different than the other first Spider-Man movies. It's not an origin story. It's more about Peter Parker and how he wants to be one of the Avengers, and it goes right off of Civil War where he has the interaction with Tony Stark and the Avengers. And this whole movie is kind of him trying to prove himself, and that comes in the way of Michael Keaton's character, the Vulture. So he's trying to defeat the Vulture, trying to prove himself to Tony Stark, and that he is good enough to be part of the Avengers.
Off the bat, I'm going to say Tom Holland played a perfect example of Spider-Man. He's smart, witty, fun teenager, and I actually like that they took place in high school this go-round. I feel like it really fit the Spider-Man world, and I just really thought he brought something fresh to Spider-Man.
Yeah, I feel like he was a really good Spider-Man while he's in the suit, and then also when he's out of the suit and he's Peter Parker, I thought he was a great Peter Parker. Mm-hmm. I think he was my favorite representation of Peter Parker. Now, I really liked Andrew Garfield and I really liked Tobey Maguire, but this one felt more like that fun comic book coming-of-age story, and it worked so well with Tom Holland, and he really sold it for me.
So, I really like the new Spider-Man costume. I like that Tony Stark's influence on it and how it's like more high-tech. It's really cool. The only little thing I'm a little confused on, Spider-Man's powers, because they've changed throughout the movie, so that I don't really feel like they explained that really well.
Yeah, I mean, it goes for more of the comic route and some of the stuff they did in The Amazing Spider-Man. It's not like the old Tobey Maguire Spider-Man's where he's like literally kind of like a spider, which I thought was cool. I like this better. It's a little more realistic, if you can say that about these movies. And like she said, I like that Tony Stark made his costume because it has those qualities that you would see in almost like the Iron Man suit. Now, I was first not sold on it in Civil War with like the eyes opening and closing, but it is really cool and it shows more expression from the character that's instead of just that blank face.
Yes, you can like see and feel Tom Holland in the Spider-Man costume. Alright, so Michael Keaton's character is the Vulture. I really think he's a really good villain in Marvel Universe, the cinematic universe. I mean, I feel like he brought more to the table than most villains in the Marvel Universe, and I just find like he was very menacing. He played like a great bad guy. And against Tom Holland and him, they played off each other really well.
Yeah, and surprisingly, Michael Keaton in this role shows a little bit of range. Like in these movies, you don't see a ton of range from, especially from the villains. And you got to see him when he's not Vulture and when he is Vulture. And it was interesting seeing that transformation between the two characters.
I do have to say that I feel like the origin of Vulture was a little rushed, and I feel like they could just touched a little more because he went from an extreme in my point.
Yeah.
But I really liked Michael Keaton. I've been rooting for Michael Keaton. You know my love for Michael Keaton. Batman 1989. That's all you need.
Yeah, speaking of that, building of characters, I thought that Spider-Man, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, was really well developed for me. Not a lot of the other characters were really well developed. Like she said for Michael Keaton's Vulture, it kind of just shows you a little bit like in the beginning and then how he ends up being the Vulture, but you don't really get that middle. It has, this movie in the beginning does have some pretty big time jumps. They're not huge, but they're big enough to where you kind of lose a little bit. But I mean, it's fine at the end of the movie because I don't need, hours of origin story for these characters.
And they also had to fit in with the Marvel Universe, so they kind of try to tie everything together.
Yeah, they do. That's another thing. They do a good job of blending this movie into the existing universe. So you kind of don't even care about the previous Spider-Man movies. This one has its own way of mixing in with these already really set movies in this whole universe that they've created.
I really liked the Vulture costume. I thought it was just not like a little scary looking, and it gave off like this menacing look, and every time like the Vulture would appear, this music or sound would appear, and so he was entering or coming or like finding Spider-Man.
Yeah, I thought the sound actually was really good in this movie, and we didn't even see an IMAX, but especially when the Vulture comes in, it's so like powerful, and he's like this really ominous, powerful presence on screen, so they sold that really well for me. And as far as music goes, I thought the score was actually really good. It had that very superhero-y score you're expecting from a movie like this.
Yeah, it does. Now, both the costumes were CG, like, most of the time, but I like that they also use aspects of, Michael Keaton, he did have part of the suit on and the mask, and then Tom Holland, like, you can tell he was wearing a suit most of the time. So I like that they incorporated both. It wasn't just all CG.
And when it is CG, it isn't that bad. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things I've always struggled with some of the Spider-Man movies is you have a character that's entirely CG swinging around. And it's, in my opinion, it's really hard to make that look good and look fluid. Mm-hmm. But in this movie, when he's flying around doing all his stuff, it looked real. It didn't look cartoony or anything like that. And when the Vulture's flying around, it doesn't look cartoony. It looks genuine, and that's kind of hard to do with these kind of characters. So you have a plethora of supporting characters in this movie. You have, obviously, Aunt May, and then you have Peter Parker's best friend, Ned, who offers a little bit of humor to the movie as well. And then you have, a couple love interests and things like that. And they didn't really do a whole lot, but I thought they serviced it pretty well, and there was some pretty good performances by everybody all around.
So Tony Stark makes his appearance in this film. He's very charismatic. It's the Tony Stark that everybody loves and everything. Robert Downey Jr., great. Happy also makes an appearance, so it's like him and Tony Stark training Tom Holland's character, Peter Parker, Spider-Man.
Yeah, and it picks up, as you see in the trailer, it's kind of like a fatherly character. Mm-hmm. And I think it sold it for me. He's playing, obviously, Iron Man, Tony Stark, and he always does a good job. And in this movie, he's the same thing. He does a good job.
Mm-hmm. One thing I would say that I did not like about the movie, I felt like it was long in comparison to other movies I've seen this year. I just felt like the pacing wasn't right.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why the movie I agree that it did feel a little long, and I think that's because it has some really epic action scenes.
There's a lot of them.
So I think that amount of action and the lulls between, it can make a movie seem kind of long. It's not like some movies where it's like rising action, climax, falling action. There's a couple climaxes in the movie, and the action did look really good, so it's not necessarily a knock on it, but it did feel a touch long at times.
Another thing I felt like it was missing that family element because they didn't really touch on Aunt May and because they didn't follow an origin story. I feel like, he is an aunt and you can tell that they love each other, but it wasn't like the other Spider-Man movies where, she lost Uncle Ben and her husband, and that part I feel like brought Spider-Man together as a whole.
Yeah, I do feel like you lose a little bit of that struggle element with Peter Parker, where he's not doing so well and he's struggling and he's kind of an outcast. You get that a little bit in this movie, but you really got it in the Tobey Maguire movies, mm-hmm. and I think that's something that really added to Spider-Man, and it made him more relatable. I mean, you're not really relatable to this character. He's a little more charismatic, a little more likable. He's not like an offbeat outcast kind of guy.
And another thing is, I don't feel like the stakes were that high in this film.
Yeah, I'll say the stakes, this is some of the lowest stakes in a Marvel movie, and I'm kind of okay with that because we've had pretty much every superhero movie. Mm-hmm. The world's gonna end, and it's these terrible, unrealistic things. And this one is kind of like he's just a high school kid. So he's a high school kid that's fighting something that's big for him, but it wouldn't be like Avengers level. And I think that worked for me. That's one of the things I actually kind of liked about it. Is it wasn't the Avengers trying to stop aliens from destroying the world. It was, Peter Parker trying to be a vigilante superhero.
I guess it just made me think that Spider-Man is a smaller superhero in comparison to, like, the other Avengers, just because of what he fought and, how he dealt through things.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting how they flipped the script, Marvel, is where you went, probably their biggest property, Spider-Man, is now becoming the least important member of the Avengers when it comes to the whole cinematic universe. And, I mean, we'll probably see him rise more and more throughout the movies, but this was a very small start for him.
So, I would give this movie a 7 out of 10. I really enjoyed this movie. Honestly think it's probably up there in the Spider-Man movies. Probably Tobey Maguire is probably the first Spider-Man movie, probably a little higher for me because it was a superhero movie that started this whole trend. And yeah, I really enjoyed Tom Holland as Spider-Man and Michael Keaton as the Vulture. Like, they made that movie for me.
Yeah, I'm going to give this movie a 7.5 out of 10. I liked it a lot. It's definitely in the top half of Marvel movies for me. As far as it goes as Spider-Man movies, it's probably second for me. I personally really love the first Spider-Man movie. I know a lot of people love Spider-Man 2, and I watched that recently. I didn't think it was as great as I remembered it being, and I think Spider-Man 1 really holds a special place for me because it was one of the first movies I ever saw opening night with my dad, and it was just a whole new world for me with superhero movies. So I don't know if any of them are ever going to beat that for me, but this was still a really good entry, and the villain was great, Tom Holland was great, the action was really good. It was a really solid movie. We decided to do something a little different with our reviews this week. We want to start throwing a little bit of spoilers in, but we wanted to keep them to the very end because, I mean, I don't honestly like watching spoiler reviews.
I like watching spoilers.
So I kind of want to make sure nobody has this movie spoiled for them, so I want to make it very apparent that we're going to talk spoilers now. So if you don't want to hear that, just click off because just go enjoy the movie because it's really good. So one of the biggest spoilers in this movie is actually one of my, if probably my favorite scene in the entire movie. So Michael Keaton's character Vulture, you find out towards the very end of the movie is the father of Peter Parker's love interest in the movie. And there's their exchange because Peter Parker's meeting with her to go to the homecoming dance, and he sees Michael Keaton there, and just the whole tension, the whole shift in that, and then Michael Keaton like interrogates him because he finds out that he's Spider-Man, and it's just so good. It's just that whole scene was fantastic. Probably one of my best scenes in a Marvel superhero movie.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that scene. The tension between Peter Parker and the Vulture. Michael Keaton was so good in the car when he was figuring out. You could see his mind is working as he's figuring out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man and that he was at certain places. It was just really good.
And you see Michael Keaton go from, he's this menacing character the whole movie. And then when you see him in his home life, he's like this likable, like normal dad, goofy guy. And then you see that shift again when he realizes that it's Spider-Man. And just like the acting range, and that was fantastic. And I thought just the tension and everything in those scenes was spot on.
There's another spoiler in this movie, if you didn't catch it from the trailers, but Zendaya, she plays, her name's Michelle throughout the movie. At the end, she goes by MJ, so she's going to be
it kind
MJ.
of sets up that she's Mary Jane going forward in the movies. And I didn't know the whole movie. I remember a really long time ago, people were like, she's going to play Mary Jane, but I've completely forgotten. The whole movie I didn't realize till the last scene where she says, oh yeah, you call me MJ. And I was like, oh, she's Mary Jane now.
I knew, but he didn't know, so that was a little bit of a shock to him.
And another thing I wanted to bring up, because a lot of people were saying it before this movie came out, is this movie's like Iron Man 4, it's going to have tons of Iron Man in it. He's actually not in the movie a ton. I think he's only in it for, 3-4 scenes? And one of those scenes, he's not even technically in it. But, like, he's not the main focus of the movie. I don't think he even takes up 25% of the screen time. So I would not say that this is an Iron Man movie.
It was also cool to see Chris Evans in the movie because they have like little videos of Captain America talking to the public.
It's like when you watch those videos in school that were like little educational videos that felt really dated. Well, for these ones, they have like Captain America talking. You saw one in the trailer. They show a couple in the movies, and they're actually really funny.
Yeah, and then also Gwyneth Paltrow reprised her role as Pepper for like a brief moment at the end.
I was honestly really surprised by that because I thought she was done.
I thought she was done too, but I give her props for continuing doing it. They were like the first of the whole Marvel bunch, so that's pretty cool.
And also, there's a little tease that's towards the end of the movie. I don't know if they're actually going to end up doing it, but they showed the Iron Spider suit because Tony Stark says, oh, well, I want to bring you on as an Avenger, and he shows him the suit, which it looks like the Iron Spider suit. I think that's what it is. And, I mean, that would be really cool if they end up doing that. And he actually, at that point in the movie, if you've seen it already, he turns down joining the Avengers because I think maybe they'll do another solo Spider-Man movie before he ends up being in this whole big mess of all the Infinity War stuff that's going on.
Yeah. So, I'm not gonna lie. I was a little disappointed in the end credit scenes. I just thought they were just kind of pointless.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I always want to stay for these end credit scenes, and every time I see them, I'm never like, this is amazing. I mean, there's probably been like 3 that I've seen in all the MCU where I was like, that was worth me sitting an extra 15 minutes here. And this one is one where you see Michael Keaton's character, the Vulture, talking to another person in prison about knowing who Spider-Man is. And the other person is probably another villain that will be coming up in another Spider-Man movie. I didn't really catch who it was. I'm not 100% sure who it is. Yeah, but it was definitely a lead-in to another Spider-Man movie.
But it also shows that Michael Keaton's character knows who he is, but does not tell the other guy.
Because that's another spoiler, is at the end of the movie, Spider-Man saves Vulture, and that kind of could become interesting later on in the storyline if they bring back Michael Keaton and his character into this whole thing.
Yes. And then the other end credit scene was basically Chris Evans as Captain America making fun of everybody waiting at the end to watch the end credit scenes.
Yeah, it's a little funny, but it's a little annoying because he's literally making fun of end credit scenes, and this is the very end. You have to wait through all the credits and that other end credit scene. So if you thought it was funny, That's good, but I thought it was a little
I was a
dull.
little irritated. I mean, I don't know.
But they got us.
Yeah, they
so.
got us. I mean, I wouldn't have stayed. I stayed for him. So, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you all enjoyed our non-spoiler and spoiler review of Spider-Man Homecoming. If you could, hit the like button down below as well as subscribe. We appreciate the support, and yeah.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.